Hello, and in this video we're going to have a quick look at compiler errors, which are the bane of anyone who's learning C++, or one of the banes. So basically the situation is that the compiler will go through your source code and check it for any errors before it generates the program code. And if it does find any errors, it won't generate the program code. So your source code has to completely obey all the rules of the language. So if you imagine you're learning a foreign language and you make a grammatical mistake in the middle of the sentence, the person you're speaking to will stop you from talking, and they won't let you speak again until you've fixed that mistake. So it is a bit annoying, really. The common cause of compiler errors is a syntax error. If your code doesn't follow the syntax rules, which is basically the grammatical rules for the C++ language, the compiler will flag the error. Quite often a syntax error is the result of a typing mistake. So for example here we meant to put John in quotes, but we accidentally stuck an extra quotation mark on the end. So the compiler will pick that up and you will get an error. Unfortunately, compiler error messages are rather hard to read. They tend to be written in a rather cryptic language, which makes sense to people who write compilers but not necessarily to people who write programs. There's also the problem that often an error can cause the compiler to get confused and start producing several other error messages which aren't necessarily related to the problem. The good news is that compilers are getting better, very slowly, but they are getting better at giving useful error messages, and certainly they are better now than they were in the 90s. So let's have a look at the kind of thing you can expect to see when you make a mistake. So here we typed John with an extra quotation mark, so you can see there's quite a lot of output here, and it all looks very confusing and difficult to read. The secret here is to ignore the stuff at the bottom and go right to the top, and then work your way downwards. So the first, that's not actually an error, that's a warning, but it does actually tell us what the problem is. You can see here the language missing a terminating double quote character. That's not terribly clear. So, but you do actually get this little arrow pointing at the bit of the code that's causing the problem. You didn't get that in the 90s. So this is already quite a big help. We know that there's something wrong with that quotation mark, and we also know that there's this line of code which is where the problem is. So you can see here that there are some other errors here. These are actually perfectly legitimate and correct bits of C++, but the compiler is confused, and because of the error it's lost track of what it's doing. It thinks these are wrong as well. So if you started trying to work out the error from looking at these lines, you would get confused because there isn't actually an error. So you could waste quite a bit of time. So the important thing to do is to start reading the error messages from the top. So here's some advice on reading error messages. So as we say, go to the top, look at the first error message. Even if that doesn't tell you anything at all, it will at least tell you which line of source code is the one that has the problem. So the next thing you do, if you can't see what the problem is, you go to that line in the source code and have a good look at it, double check it, see if you can find any mistakes. If there aren't any mistakes, then it may be that this line of code depends on something else that you should have done earlier but either didn't do or didn't do properly. So what you do then is you start working backwards from the line in the source code file. So you go up the file, checking it carefully until you get to the top of the file, and make sure that you have all the things in there that you need. I mean, quite common, if you miss out a statement, then that'll cause a problem later on. So that's the best advice I can give you really at this stage. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem really. To be good at working out compiler errors, you need to have a good understanding of the language. But when you're learning the language, you need to sort out compiler errors, and you don't have a good understanding of the language. And the only way you can acquire a good understanding of the language is to sort out the compiler errors and go forwards. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but it does actually get better with a bit of practice. And I know it is very annoying, but as you get more used to it, you'll find out that the compiler does actually do quite a useful job in keeping you out of trouble. Not always, but maybe 70 or 80% of the time. So it is worth gritting your teeth and putting up with the aggravation. Okay, so I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next lecture.